into any one quadrant when you watch this movie. Like when I was 17, I was like, yeah, let's go. This is a great action movie. Now at 40, I'm like, okay, I get it. I respect the double narrative. But it's amazing how you just fall into one of these four ways of interpreting this movie.
Do you think that's why? So some movies we were talking about this. Our most popular episode is Total Recall. For all of our episodes, almost 300 episodes, is Total Recall. And I think that was a movie that came out and everyone understood it. Critics, audiences, they always went, "This is great. This is the movie." And there's enough. You're a kid, you love it. You're an adult, you love it. You're a critic, you love it. You're a studio head, you love it. You're on it, and that's why it's so popular. Do you think that's why Starship Troopers? It has a very loyal following who are like, "You don't get the fascism, man. It's fascism." And then you get the people who love it because just kill them bugs. I don't know that accent, but kill. But there's also people who despise it. So I think that's what's kept it from being. It's a cult classic, but it's not like a universal beloved film. If that makes sense. Do you think that's what kept it from it?
I agree. I think so. I mean, our biases are so strong. It's like we see where we have that bias at. It's amazing how you could go into a movie and then come out on four different corners of how it is. And the fact that it's so complicated and the fact that it's where people are just now getting it now is why I think it's made this whole renaissance lately. Like if you Google Starship Troopers right now, in the last few months, you'll see tons of results and screenings and notes that like, yeah, we were wrong about this. I mean, even Honest Trailers came out recently with a hilarious skit about Starship Troopers that actually brought back Casper Van Dien to do some of the voiceovers, which was great.
This movie though, so I did Back to the Future. I brought my friend Niall in from Korea, and the researching of Back to the Future was overwhelming. I bought a book to read about it. I went on the IMDb page to read all the trivia, and it was never ending trivia. And the same as for this. There's a book about the making of it. There are like there's two commentaries on the Blu-ray. Endless making of documentaries. There's 20-minute documentaries about its fascist undertones. That's a million people have listened to. Countless Q&As. Retrospectives. There's just so much. It overwhelmed me a little bit, and I have so many notes. I'm not going to use 4% of them, but I thought you brought something interesting. So like when I was when I was working on my master's at Florida State, I found a thing called social judgment theory, which I thought was really interesting to me. And it's basically people have latitudes of rejection and acceptance towards let's say we look at one way really strongly, we see something the opposite, we're going to reject it immediately because that's just our latitude of rejection.
Like confirmation bias.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost. So what we want is confirmation bias is why we stick to our own echo chamber.
Exactly. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people in those echo chambers because they have such strong latitudes of rejection and acceptance. So if you are, it's interesting on this because all right, you go into Starship Troopers and you are a gung-ho military, nothing wrong with it. You see Starship Troopers and you're like, yes. You're 19 years old and you go, yes, this is my movie. But you're also a 19-year-old film snob who knows Verhoeven and you're very in tune with certain things and you pick up on the fascist undertones and no one gets it. You're going to be obsessed with this movie. So we have two totally different crowds obsessed with it because of like what their latitudes of rejection and acceptance are. Some people accept it because other people missed it. You don't get it, man. Like there's the counterculture of it, but then there's also the people who love it. It's really interesting.
I would add a third because from reading this and knowing people in the military that a lot of this it's like a love letter to the trigger pullers, like the people down there in the dirt, getting the job done, not afraid, putting their lives on the line. I mean, if you talk to any Army infantrymen, they're going to love it. They're not going to love it because they're just killing bugs, but because it focuses on someone who's down in the mud doing the dirty work. So, yeah, I think there's also, in addition to what you said, that that having that experience identify with what's going on as well.
Oh, no, absolutely. Just having that experience. I just love how you could be, I love it because it's just about being on the ground. It's about being a trooper. But then other people will go, well, most people missed it, so I love it. It's a really there's not many
ironic.
Yeah,
I love it because I'm being ironic or a contrarian.
But how many people have? Not many people have those two groups that love it. If that makes sense. Not many people have walked that that line for the movie. And that's something really interesting about it, is how, but Verhoeven's always done that. He made this movie Elle. It's hard to explain, but we talked about it on the podcast, but a lot of people, he also triggered a lot of people on that one, not like in a bad way, because a character didn't act the way that people are conditioned to characters acting on screen. So she got an Academy Award nomination, Isabelle Huppert, for her role in Verhoeven's latest movie. But a lot of people hated it because they're not used to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, Starship Troopers was hated in Germany and Italy when it came out because it struck too close to home because it resembled their fascist societies of the 30s. They hated it.
Oh, I could totally see that. Yeah, I listened to this really. Did you hear that on the Verhoeven Casper Van Dien thing? There was a 30-minute interview with them talking about the movie.
Yeah, I saw it. I loved it.
Yeah, he's such a character. I think Van Dien. I don't know. Everybody in this movie, though, they all put in really good performances. I think they cast the perfect. You know what else I think has really helped this movie is by casting. So they didn't want to get a lot of A-listers. They didn't get teenagers, so they cast a lot of TV actors. So they got Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyer, Denise Richards, Jake Busey. MPH was known, but he wasn't known in the movies. Then you also had like Seth Gilliam, Patrick Muldoon, and then you had Ironside, who people know he keeps losing arms in Verhoeven movies. He lost his arm in this one, we didn't see it. But when I think about this movie, I don't think of Dina Meyer. I think of Diz. I think of Johnny Rico. So I love it when you watch these movies sometimes and you're able to, as much as I love the Mission Impossible movies and they're getting better and better, that's Tom Cruise on screen. That's not Ethan Hunt. But in Starship Troopers, it's Ace and it's Johnny and it's Diz on the floor killing bugs. And they're the characters, if that makes sense. And I think
totally. And I think it was a wise move to cast these actors that were relatively unknown because they went all in. I mean, they were all in the role too. I mean, you could tell they were completely committed to this. And in that interview you mentioned with Verhoeven and Casper Van Dien, Casper made a couple comments, like he would question some of the direction he got from Verhoeven, but Verhoeven was like, yeah, just do it, trust me, just go for it, even though it seemed a little weird, and they didn't understand it at the time. So I think it was casting these up-and-comers or these relatively unknowns enabled Verhoeven to get him to buy in and really go for it, even though they didn't quite understand what he was going for. And that's just next level type direction.
And you know what I kind of love too is you can see how times change. So in this movie, Jake Busey had a heat stroke and they were shooting in 100-degree weather out in Wyoming. I mean, people were dropping like flies. They had 40-pound armor in this. I mean, the stats on this movie of what they made are just insane, but people were dropping but I think everyone hung in there because he was the first person on set, Verhoeven. He was the first and last person on set every day. So you're in 100-degree weather and you're hot and you're heat stroke, but Verhoeven's out there barking like a dog to get you to react. You're kind of thinking, I'm going to keep doing this movie. But what's really interesting, he went on to do Hollow Man after this. And Hollow Man is a movie that he hates. Verhoeven said that 30 other people could have directed that movie. It's not, so we covered it on the pod too, and it's not a Verhoeven film. It's not. It's generic 101. But on the making of documentary of it, you had Josh Brolin just insulting Verhoeven, kind of saying he's like an autistic guy on set. You have just people kind of going, yeah, it is what it is. And the movie got an Oscar nomination for special effects, but when he was in his heyday, people would go to Wyoming for that kind of weather and get heat stroke because of him. But when he lost it a little bit, you could tell his crew wasn't as into Hollow Man as much. So it's interesting how you watch these behind the scenes documentaries, and it's really interesting to see how he had made some Stone Cold classics, but just how the attitude towards him had changed because he wasn't on such a hit streak.
No, they just stopped buying into it.
Yeah.
They stopped. Yeah. Like maybe this guy isn't as big of a genius as we thought he was or something along those lines.
And
I don't know.
But Shyamalan's twists were the greatest thing on the planet. And then everyone hated him.
Yeah. And he had to go to almost indie level to regain his stature in the industry.
He did.
With Devil. I mean, Devil was an epic rebound. It's one of the best rebounds I think a director's ever made in the last 20 years.
Well, he produced that. And so
he didn't direct it?
No,
he didn't direct Devil?
He produced it.
Oh, my bad. I stand corrected.
The Dowdles who did As Above, So Below, but he came back with The Visit, and that's a great comeback because it was like a $4 million movie, and it hit hard and it was a success, and then that led to Split, which punched everyone in the face. Everyone loved that. So he just went back to his roots, and then people started loving him again. And then that's the same thing that happened with Verhoeven. He left and he shot a movie in Holland called Black Book, and everyone just went, "Oh, he's back." It's like he never left. He just I guess had to leave because I guess the system at the time, after some duds, he couldn't make movies that he wanted anymore with those budgets. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So he went back to Holland.
Yeah.
And he's like, why? I'll just go back to being a big fish in a small pond, and so I could do whatever I want.
Give me $20 million and I'll make my movie. And then he made 2, and now Elle was Oscar nominated, and it brought everyone loves him now. Because same thing with M. Night. You make these massive blockbusters, but this movie now, I kind of, like you said, I love that the life. It's interesting that Netflix during this time, the second life that it's brought to movies. So Lockout has gotten a second life because of this pandemic. Right now, Jupiter Ascending is getting reevaluated. Right. I've always loved it. We've always loved it on this pod, but it's in Starship Troopers now is becoming like, holy crap, did you know that? Oh my gosh. And that's the power Honest Trailers has. So it's really cool that it's getting its due, I would say due popularity, right?
Yeah. And even so, I mentioned to a few coworkers and friends, it's like, hey, I'm watching Starship Troopers and preparing for this podcast. And they're like, oh, that movie was awful. I'm like, when was the last time you saw it? They're like, I don't know, 20 years ago. I'm like,
wow.
Trust me, watch it again. It's kind of like, I hearken it to, if you have a bad experience at Arby's 20 years ago, and then you're like, I'm never going back to Arby's. It's like, if you have that bad experience with a consumer brand, you don't go back. But like, that's what I think is what happened here. People often had a bad experience with the movie. They didn't understand it. They fell into the WTF quadrant that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? And then they wrote it off. But yeah, it's a great point how it's back, and it's one hell of a watch right now while everyone's still staying indoors a lot of time.
It's what was I gonna say about that? I had a great point. Oh, and also, okay. So in 1960, Alfred Hitchcock made Psycho, and he could have shot it in color, but he chose to shoot it in black and white so that everyone's like, what is this old-timey dud? And then when the kill happens, everyone just loses their minds. So he lulled them into a sense of old-fashioned, this movie isn't hip. And then when the kill happens, people just went, oh my gosh. Like, they got lulled into that kill. Does that make sense? So in this one,
it was the opposite.
Yeah. Do you think he filmed it so bright and so cheery, and so some of the performances are so over the top that people just took it at? But you also have to, as a director, people are going to take this movie at surface level.
Absolutely. That's exactly why he did. He had this facade of these beautiful people, this bright environment, all these sexy planes. So you don't realize that you're caught into this militaristic society that may or may not be, the right way to move forward.
Violence is the answer from Ironside, Michael Ironside, when he says that. And I love how Ironside had his arms gone. Rue McClanahan, as the biology teacher, was blind. Then the guy that said more people for the meat grinder, he didn't have an arm. So all these people who were up in the world were missing something or had been injured or were hurt.
Like, there are some things that stuck out to me. Like, every time that Rico got promoted was when someone died, and he was always like, yes.
You're that, so like, you died.
Someone died. Yeah, we got an opening for a corporal. You want it? Yeah. And he'd smile. And then sergeant, yeah. Lieutenant, I'll take it until I die. Or you find someone. So every time someone died, he smiled and was happy about taking that role. I think probably my favorite part of the movie when he was about to shoot the nuke into the bug hole, and as he was aiming, Jake Busey, as he was running back, he slaps Rico in the head. And then, like, Rico fires as his head was kind of, like, off to the side after getting slapped in the head. So, like, how did he make that shot if Jake Busey just slapped him in the side of the head? So he fired it, not even looking through the scope. I noticed that, and I thought,
that's funny. I never even saw that. Oh,
you didn't see that part? I saw it, and I'm like, how did he shoot that perfectly after getting hit in that side of the head?
Oh, that's funny. But, man, I like Busey. Between this and Frighteners, I feel bad they didn't do more, because I liked him in this and that movie, dude.
Yeah. Who do you think, whose idea was it for him to play the violin?
So I know it had to have been Verhoeven, because he had to learn it before they started shooting.
Because that violin scene, it stole the scene in both the times he played. When they are in the the barracks when Reek